Video showing a big box store's roof caving in. Local officials pouring over.
Every time something like this happens, someone says it's God's judgment. Storms, heat, natural disasters. But as I read those comments, I started wondering, what if we've been asking the wrong questions? Then another image caught my attention, a rainbow. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. Genesis tells us God gave the rainbow as the sign of that promise. Whether you're a person of faith, someone who's skeptical, or simply curious, it's a fascinating place to begin. Because if that promise is true, how should we understand moments like these?
That you dare to dream.
Last week we explored the possibility that maybe our passions don't need to be destroyed. Maybe they need to be reordered. To love God first, to love our neighbors as ourselves. Everything else finding its proper place. Only a few days later, the conversation shifted. People weren't talking about banners anymore. They were talking about storms. People began asking whether these weather events were God's judgment. As I listened, I started noticing something. Whenever something gets out of order, it begins to unravel. That simple thought became the thread connecting everything I experienced this week. While everyone else was focused on the storms, I stepped outside into my backyard. I wasn't expecting anything. Then suddenly, the sky behind my house filled with fireworks. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. My birthday happens to be July 5th. According to the biblical rhythm we find in Genesis, the day begins in the evening. So those fireworks weren't technically ending the 4th of July. They were welcoming my birthday. The next day, our church hosted our first community yard sale. At first glance, it looked like people selling things. But the more I watched, the more I realized something deeper was happening. People were bringing items they no longer needed, things that had become out of place in their lives. Not because those things were bad, but because they were no longer serving their purpose. Instead of collecting dust, those same items became a blessing to someone else. The proceeds helped support the ministry of our church. Neighbors met neighbors, conversations happened, relationships began, community was strengthened. It struck me that this wasn't really about a yard sale. It was about reordering, taking things that had become disconnected from their purpose and allowing them to become a part of something bigger. As I reflected on all this, I realized I wasn't just thinking about the headlines. I was thinking about my own life. Before I became a Christian, I spent years behind the camera. I found myself closer to opportunity, closer to success, closer to influence, closer to power, closer to recognition. At the time, I believed that meant I was moving in the right direction. Looking back, I realized I wasn't measuring my life by peace. I wasn't measuring it by relationships. I wasn't measuring it by whether I was becoming more loving. I was measuring it by the proximity to power, my proximity to money, my proximity to influence. The closer I got to those things, the further away I got from the things that mattered most. Peace, contentment, purpose. Eventually, things began to unravel. Not because filmmaking was wrong, not because money was wrong, not because success was wrong, not because influence was wrong. The disorder wasn't around me. The disorder was within me. My loves had become disordered. Looking back, I wasn't just documenting culture. I was living it. Maybe your story isn't filmmaking. Maybe it's your career. Maybe it's your business. The question isn't whether those things are good. The question is what sits at the center of them. Today, I'm still behind the camera. I'm still telling stories. But now, I'm looking for something different. I'm looking for God's fingerprints in everyday life. This week, I saw storms. I saw a rainbow. I watched neighbors bless neighbors through a simple yard sale, and I remembered a season of my own life. At first, those all felt like separate stories. But the more I reflected, the more I noticed the same thread running through each one. Whenever something gets out of order, it begins to unravel. But maybe the opposite is true as well. Whenever we begin to place things back in God's order, restoration begins. Maybe that's what the yard sale was really about. Maybe that's what stewardship is. Maybe that's what repentance is. Not simply feeling sorry, but allowing God to reorder our loves, to love Him first, to love our neighbors as ourselves, and allowing everything else to begin finding its proper place. Until next time, keep the faith.